of everything.
I'm fasting. Don't
I'm just asking you about your deen as Muslims.
As a deen, yes.
I'm just asking you about your deen as Muslims. I want to make sure that I'm working from a correct premise. Is the Quran an infallible book? Is it? What?
Yes, of course.
Yes, of course. It is an infallible book. Now, if I said to you that Muhammad, was born in Petra, you would say that that's historically wrong, correct?
Absolutely.
Why is it historically wrong?
Because it's in the wrong place.
It's in the wrong place. Why do we know it's in the wrong place?
Because that's what you told me.
Okay, let me...
That's what you told me.
Yeah, I want to help you. The reason why we know it would be the wrong place is because the historical documents are clear that Muhammad was born in Mecca.
Absolutely.
So you'd be arguing against the historical evidence, right? Yes. Right. So we've established a principle by which we can judge a truth claim or not. If I said that Muhammad was an Egyptian, would you say that's true or false?
Absolutely false.
Absolutely false. Why would you say it's absolutely false?
Because it's not true.
Why is it not true?
Because it's not what the history says.
Because it's not what the history says. So we've established a principle. If I said that the Arabs, the Muslims, never had an empire, they never conquered their surrounding nations, would you say that's true or false?
Yeah, go on.
Is this a history lesson?
Right.
Go on.
So, now, my point to you is, the man that a minute ago didn't want to speak, but now suddenly does.
No, I want to get the point. I don't want to discuss.
So what we've established, make sure that we can get in the feet. Yeah. So
make sure you get his feet.
Yeah, make sure we can get our feet. So what we've established is that if someone makes a truth claim about history, and all the evidence contradicts that history, we have a reason to say whether something is true or false or not. So, the Quran makes certain claims about history that are factually false. They are factually in error. And I'm going to give you one example.
Prove it.
I'm just about to. Go on. I just want to make sure that you follow the line of argument that I'm making. Remember, when I said all those false things about Muhammad, you said it was wrong because it contradicted the known history. Well, the Quran makes claims that contradicts known history, and I'm going to share with you now. So, now, does anyone here know what happened to the Jewish temple?
What Jewish temple?
The Jewish temple, the first century Jewish temple.
Where about?
You are?
Educate.
It was destroyed
By who?
Where about?
by the Romans
Where?
in 70 AD.
Where? You mean Palestine?
In Israel, yeah.
Palestine.
Yeah, in Israel.
Palestine.
Palestine.
So, now, it says in the Quran that Muhammad went to visit the farthest mosque. Explain to me, how could there be a mosque in Jerusalem before the Muslims conquered Jerusalem?
Sorry?
You weren't paying attention. No. Maybe you can answer.
No, go on, repeat it so you can share it.
You heard the question.
Yeah, but go on.
No, you heard the question.
Please, no, do it, because I want them to share it with me.
But he's not going to talk.
No, he will.
No, bro.
He will talk.
Bro, just answer the question.
He will talk.
We're all together. I'll answer.
Some weird
Okay,
things
let me ask this brother, since he's the only one that wants to answer the question. The Quran says, "Glory to Allah, who did take his servant for a journey by night from the sacred mosque to the farthest mosque, whose precincts we did bless." How could there be a mosque in Jerusalem before the Muslims conquered Jerusalem? It didn't exist. There was no mosque.
So, hold on a second. The temple was for the Jews? Temple of the Jews? I know.
The temple belonged to the Jewish people. It was a Jewish faith. It was built by Herod.
There's not actually, it's called Jewish. Israelites.
Whatever you want to term them as.
Israelites, yes.
Whatever you want to term them as. Just because I don't want to get caught up on pedantics, let's call them Israelites.
Israelites, yes.
So they had the temple. The temple was destroyed in 70 AD. There was no religious building in Jerusalem at the site that you now know as the Dome of the Mosque. That mosque in Jerusalem, the one that Muhammad journeyed to. There was no such building, but the Quran says that there was. That is a historical error par excellence. How does an infallible book talk about something factually false? I think the silence speaks for itself.
We're just fasting, we don't want to waste our time.
You don't want to waste your time, you just
we
want
don't
to
wanna
stand
get
here
hit
and
with
listen
your
to me.
books.
You just want to stand here and listen
We're
to me.
protecting ourselves.
Fair enough.
We just want to hear your fairy tales, so carry on.
Fair enough. Fair
It's
enough.
killing time.
Yeah, killing time.
Go on.
So answer me. What was the building that was being referred to?
Do you have another story for us?
Do you not want to answer the question about
I just want to listen, like I told you. But
Tell
go
me.
on, tell us another story.
Tell me, what was the building that was being referred to in this passage?
Again, if you ain't got a story, I'm going to go find a story elsewhere. Do you have another story for us?
No, not for you. Not for you. So notice, they don't have an answer. The Quran says something that is factually false. It speaks about a building that does not exist. It says that there was a mosque in Jerusalem. No such building existed. It is historically in error. That's the first one. Let's find some more Muslims. Let's ask them about other historical errors in the Quran. Hi guys, I hear you. Come in. Yes, there's another.
I saw you actually. We were talking. Congratulations.
Yes.
No, you did it very well. You were very calm.
The Alaska Mosque was built
Small
after
statements, very crucial statements.
of the conquest.
That's the best way. That's the best way because
It was within the first generation. They conquered Jerusalem and then they built a mosque. But the fact of the matter is that no such mosque existed at the time that Muhammad was supposedly going there. And the Quran says he visited a mosque. It doesn't say that he visited a temple.
I was going to give you a reference to the Hadith, but I have to take time to check it out.
That's
But
fine.
They asked Muhammad in the Hadith, and this can be verified. The Sokha might send
Yeah,
it to
go
you
on.
guys. It says they asked the Prophet Muhammad which was the first mosque, and he said Al-Aqsa Mosque. And he said which was the second mosque, and I think he referred to the mosque in Mecca.
Right.
I can't remember the name.
Yeah.
I don't want to time. Then he said that what was the distance of time between the building of both mosques? He said 40 years.
Right.
So that is why I wanted to bring this up. So
Well, that's a massive historical contradiction.
I'll get
Massive
the reference now.
Send it to JC. So the fact of the matter is, if Muslims are saying that this is an infallible book, why does it get its history wrong? Did God not know his history? If he knew his history, why is he making such historical blunders? Saying that there was a mosque in Jerusalem is like saying that there was a Walmart in first century Rome. You wouldn't say that there was a Walmart in first century Rome, so why does Allah say that there's a mosque in Jerusalem? But it gets worse. And I just want to find some Muslim to speak to about how worse it gets.
What's the definition of mosque?
So,
What's the definition of mosque?
a place of worship.
Yeah. What a place of worship? You know what's a place of worship defined in the Islamic way?
It's a Well, how would you define a mosque?
No. Define a mosque mean
A
anywhere.
mosque is a place where Allah is worshipped.
No, it's God who's worship. It's not
Allah.
No, God.
Allah.
You're a dictator.
Who's God?
You're a dictator.
Who's God?
Allah.
Your God or my God?
for everybody.
They're not the same.
No, God for
They're not the same.
universe.
Yahweh and
Universe.
Allah of
You are
Muhammad
fanatic,
are not
you
the
are
same.
fanatic.
Yahweh and Allah are not the same.
Listen, man, you know what I mean? You're not an educated person. Because if you know the literature, if you go to university, first thing in a word, when you take a word, you have to explain it technically and linguistically. You can't mix that between Arab language and English language.
So you don't like my definition?
No, you're not educated. Just like
So what's your definition?
That's not my definition.
What's your definition?
Scholars' definition.
What is your definition of
Scholars'
Muslim?
definition. If you listen, if
Yeah.
you want to discuss with me, discuss me. If you want to just dictate on me, I don't like it, You know what I mean? I'm coming from St. Augustine, ancestors. Who teach you a Catholic in your country?
Okay, what's your definition?
Definition what?
A mosque.
A mosque. A place, any place.
Yes,
Any place,
yes.
even where Muslims pray to God.
Right. Okay,
So
did
go-
you hear that? You just said that a mosque is a place where God is worshipped, any place where God is worshipped. When Muhammad went on his night journey to Jerusalem, where was this place of worship that he went to? What? Petra.
What's mean Petra?
It's by Jordan, Amman, Jordan.
I don't know where exactly
It's a
Petra.
Petra.
How do you know?
In the Quran, written in the Quran.
Is that Petra? He mentioned Petra.
Yeah,
In the Quran, mentioned Petra. Go back.
Bro, I'm asking you.
Nonsense.
One second. I agree. There's 1 second.
He said
Where did Muhammad go?
He said they said somewhere.
I'm asking you
They said somewhere.
a simple
I'm
question.
trying to translate from Arabic.
Where did he go?
He said Masjid Aqsa. Aqsa, you mean
Aqsa Mosque.
Aqsa Mosque.
In where?
Somewhere in Jerusalem.
Right. Do you actually know, right, where that mosque is? Do you know it? Do you know where the location of that mosque is?
I've never been there. I'm not from there.
Right. It's considered to be on the
Have you
Temple
been there?
Mount. No, I'm just talking about general knowledge.
Yeah, okay.
Alaska Mosque is generally thought to be on the Temple Mount.
Who said the Temple Mount?
That's just commonly known, sir.
No, it's not coming along.
Maybe not to you.
Yeah, that's not.
Maybe not to
that's
you.
You invented.
Well, Google fact check me.
Google is not. It's not.
Fact check me
It's
then.
not. No,
Fact check me.
It's not Google. It's
So,
not scholar. You
what
see-
I'm saying
you
is,
see, I
bro-
have to learn to educate yourself. Go to
No,
university, go to
because
university.
here's the thing that you're not
You're
listening
not
to.
theologian because you say
Right.
common knowledge.
It is common
I disagree
knowledge.
with you.
You just don't know
I
it.
study philosophy.
You just don't know it.
I'm studying philosophy.
Okay.
I'm pragmatist guy. I mean,
Sir, are you a
I
Muslim?
this course. Excuse me.
I'm asking you if you're a Muslim.
Well, I'm talking about Islam now.
Why you
I'm theologian and philosopher. Theologian and philosopher.
Right.
I'm Muslim. You know the
Thank you.
You know, you know the father who in the civilization of the West, even a Muslim from North Africa.
Do you believe this book is infallible?
So,
you believe
question
this-
me now? I'm questioning. Can you talk about a place about worship in Islam?
Yes.
You know what I mean? What means
There
for
is
you?
a mosque
What's the
that
mosque?
has been
What is mosque?
referred
What's
to
mosque
in
mean?
Surah
What is
17.
mosque?
Using your definition.
Muslim
Using your
definition.
Got the
definition.
reference. I'm waiting
Your
for it.
definition is a place where God is worshipped. So which place did Muhammad
Anywhere.
go to in Jerusalem?
Anywhere someone do
The Alaska Mosque is meant to be on
What's
the
your
Temple
point?
Mount.
What's your point? You know what I mean? I don't understand the way you
Well,
point.
if you'd actually stop interrupting, you might get to my point, but
Because
you
you're
keep
talking,
interrupting.
you're preaching, you're not lecturing, you're not discussing.
Yeah,
Go
right.
to the front.
Because you just jumped in and you're just interrupting, sir. So, let's be clear. Muslims themselves say that Alaska Mosque is on the Temple Mount.
Listen,
That building did not exist at the time of Muhammad. So which building did he go to?
You're not educated. I'm telling you from today. This guy, I'm not education. You are very low. Go to university, do theology, I think. Come back and you know how to discuss.
So
you
answer my question.
don't have definitions. You don't have the definition between
We have the
language and
definition
my
here.
question.
We have it here for you. I'm just waiting
What's
for
this?
you. It shows you the distance of
It's not
time,
educated,
which
right?
mosque was
It's
made,
like Allah's
the
not God.
40-year period between the
Okay.
Allah's
mosques.
not
Keep
God.
scrolling because it goes
So basically, yeah, Brother Yaqub, once again, with his knowledge of hadiths, has just made the Muslim position even worse. Because Sahih al-Muslim 520,
Al-Muslim doesn't exist.
Book
Al-Muslim.
5, Hadith 1, Book 4, Hadith 1056, okay, says this. Abu Dar reported, I said, Messenger of Allah, which mosque was set up first on earth? He said, Al-Masjid Al-Haram, the sacred, that's the one in Mecca. I again said, then which next? He said, it was the Masjid Aqsa. Aqsa, thank you. I again said, how long the space of time between their setting up. He, the Holy Prophet, said it was 40 years.
40 years.
What does it mean?
That contradicts everything we know about history.
What does it mean?
Everything.
What does
The
it mean?
first temple of Solomon was set up. The first temple of Solomon was set up over 1,000 years ago, which means that there was a city called Mecca with a mosque over 1,000 years before Christ. Over 1,000 years before Christ. It's contradicting everything we know about history. I study history, sir.
Logic.
I study
Because
history.
there's contradiction.
No, where the contradiction
is based on.
is that your
Can
prophet
you answer the question?
has
Can you
just
answer the question?
said,
Do you
yes,
study the
certainly,
principle of mind?
your prophet
You're not-
has
you're
just
not-
said
I'm just trying to question
that
you
a
to find-
mosque was built in
It's a
Mecca
contradiction.
1,000 years before Christ, and that another mosque was then built in Jerusalem. Where is the evidence?
Okay, I'll ask you this question.
Where's the
Is it
evidence?
History.
Where's
Is
the
it
evidence?
History. Is it history?
Oh, he's back.
History. Is
I have
it,
another question for you.
I told you.
I got another story. I got another story for you.
is it history?
Another fable from your Quran.
Is it history? Is exact science?
Exact in the sense of a physical science.
Bob, you've done it twice. Bob, you've done it twice, Bob.
Listen, when you study logic, you have to have, some thing to start from. It have to be absolute fact. History is not absolute fact. You started because you didn't have university.
Are you going to actually address the
I'm
argument?
asking you about you have
Address the argument.
Because you don't have no
Okay,
fundamental
you
of
can insult
mind.
me as much as you like.
Tell me the principle of
But
mind.
address
Principle
the
of mind.
argument.
Because you say it's wrong.
Was there
It's
a
wrong.
mosque
No,
in
it's
Mecca
wrong.
1,000 years
Prophet
before
said-
Christ?
Prophet
Yes
said
or
it's
no?
Yes. If the prophet said so, it's yes. Because it's a prophet.
Right.
You're not.
The evidence contradicts
History
you.
Has nothing to do
The
with-
evidence contradicts you.
Where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? What
The evidence
you
contradicts
Past,
you.
Future, or your present?
Where are the first
I'm
records of
asking you,
Mecca being
what-
talked about?
What evidence you talk about? Past
Where are
evidence.
the first
From past.
evidences of
The evi-
Mecca being talked
The
about?
evidence. It's not important for me, my car. It's not
Where-
important for
where?
anyone,
Where?
you know what I mean? It doesn't matter.
Where?
It doesn't matter.
Right?
It doesn't matter about the
Mecca
principle.
is a
About
late
how
city
you
in
argue,
antiquity.
How you argue, you don't have no
Possibly
basic of
an
logic, you have no
early
analysis.
medieval city.
You're just talking. Try to educate yourself. You
Anyway,
don't
bro,
know,
have
you
a
know.
good day. I'm going to go find
That's
someone who
guys-
can have a
That's
conversation.
guy, you don't have no principle
Sir,
of mind.
are you a
You
Muslim?
don't know nothing about us, but it's okay.
Are you a Muslim, sir?
Why do you ask me?
Doesn't
Because
matter.
I want to ask questions about the
Yeah,
Quran.
forget this
You
guy.
want
And
to
I want
ask
to ask
me
Muslims.
about Quran?
Yes.
Why would you ask me?
Because I'm asking, you might be a Muslim.
No.
Do you notice the guy just called me a racist? I'm a racist because I criticize their
No,
Quran,
it's not, because
and
you are-
in his logic
trust
that
me,
makes
trust
me a
trust
racist.
me. Wait, you know why?
Leon,
Why racist?
does that make me a
Just why
racist?
you make me racist. No, which make me racist.
Did you just nudge you? I'm gonna.
You know why I make you racist?
Why am I a
Because You're not
racist?
educated. You're not.
Oh,
you're not.
so a
You're
racist is
ignorant.
someone who's not educated.
Yeah, same like you.
I see.
Tell us what
I
you know
see.
about Quran. Let's see.
So,
maybe it will be
Look at
something
you, son.
interesting.
let's look at another example of the errors of the Quran, the historical errors of the Quran. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hand up if you know the first references to chainmail. You know that armor, the armor that people wear of rings of steel bound together. When and where was it invented? It was invented by the Persians around the 6th century BC. BC.
You don't know to pronounce that word.
Some people try
Go
to
back school.
argue.
Go back school.
Some people try to argue that chainmail was invented by the Celts.
No, if you look in the Quran, it
But
says,
we have-
it says Solomon
we
had
have
chainmail,
examples.
and chainmail didn't exist.
Okay, guys, I'm going to step that way a bit. If you want to listen to me, follow me. If you want to listen to them, stay here.
Go back to school, mate.
So,
You know what I mean? Go to the
So- we have examples of Macedonians, Celts, and Persians and Romans all using chainmail. our earliest evidence of chainmail existing comes from the Persian Empire around the 6th or 7th century. King David lived 1,000 years before Christ. The Persians were 600 or 700 years before Christ. My numbers may be slightly off, I'm doing this from memory. However, you can check to see if what I'm saying is true. Google me now to find out what was the earliest reference to chainmail. And you will see that it was before King David. At the time of King David, the armour that was used was plate armour supplemented by thick leather armour. That is a historical fact. A historical fact that this so-called infallible book gets entirely wrong. It gets it entirely wrong. Because this book was written in the 7th century AD by a man familiar with chainmail, but who did not know the history of antiquity and the history of the Bronze Age. So, what I am referring to, listen carefully. This is in the Quran, Surah 34, Ayah 10 and Ayah 11, as translated by a Muslim linguist called Yusuf Ali. So this is a Muslim translation of their own holy book. And it says the following: we bestowed grace aforetime on David. On who? On who? Speak up, brother. On who?
Jesus was murdered.
Speak up. On who?
David!
David.
As only
From
one
ourselves.
God. And his name is...
O you mountains, sing ye back the praise of Allah with him, and ye birds also, and we made the iron soft for him,
Hallelujah. Hey,
commanding, listen carefully,
Jesus.
make thou coats of mail, balancing well, rings
It's allowed.
of
freedom.
chain armour. A very lucid,
Freedom of speech.
a very clear description of chainmail ascribed to David hundreds of years before chainmail ever existed. You don't believe me, O Muslims?
Get away from
Go
religion.
and check
Our
my
religion.
facts. The Quran
Get
gets
away
it
from
wrong.
Christianity.
The
And
Quran
And the right.
is in error. The Quran
It's all
gets its
brainwashing.
history
It's all
wrong.
brainwashing. They want
No.
man to be like a sheep.
Why,
Just
as a
follow us.
Christian,
You have no
why,
history.
as a
No
Christian,
evidence of your God.
am I pointing this out?
Your God was killed.
Why don't I talk about
Jesus was
Christianity?
Was
Well,
murdered.
I do talk about Christianity
Cristo. Cristo.
all the time.
Cristo
However,
Ramadan. He was
Muslims
killed.
in the park often spend their time attacking the Christian faith, which invites me as a Christian
How?
to attack the Quran.
Yeah.
Now, Muslims say, not Christians, Muslims say that this book is perfect in every way,
Well, your book is not perfect.
without
And their book is
contradicting
not perfect.
history
All full of
or science.
horrible errors.
So when
All your books.
the Quran
The Bible and the
contradicts
Quran.
history
are full of so many
It is
crazy
fair
mistakes.
for me to point out that error.
You have to be fair. Don't just
To point
condemn
out
the book
the
of the
fact
Muslim. You
that
have
the
to condemn your book
Quran
as well.
gets its history
You have
wrong.
no evidence whatsoever.
And if it
Your
gets its
religion
history wrong,
is not true one.
then the Muslims
It's
who
false.
say that this
Your
book is
Jesus was
perfect
murdered.
have now a good reason not to believe.
You believe what?
Not to believe.
You are
No,
you were-
sir.
You were a bunch of criminals.
Do
used
you
to
have
cut the throat
anything
of
to say about the
anyone against
argument?
you. All the churches, they still, now I'm glad it's only when people they like to celebrate, then they have to do, and still going down. Church is still going, only foreigners.
Nothing.
Who they,
He's got nothing to say
No English.
about the error
How could you
of
believe?
the Quran.
Believe what? Believe what?
Come, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
So the error is this, sir.
What about Christianity?
King David, you know who David was?
David, there was a
I'm going to. The error is this.
you've got it wrong.
King David
You've got it wrong, my
lived
friend.
1,000 years before Christ.
David,
Chainmail
They were
was invented
David
700 years before Christ.
was a peasant Hebrew
In other
from
words,
Judea.
hundreds of years
Was from Judea,
after David
why- yeah.
lived.
It
But
was
the
peasant.
Quran contradicts history. Because the Quran says this. Listen carefully. We bestowed grace aforetime on David. Who are we talking about?
David.
Say it again.
The
Shout like you've got a pair. Who?
David.
David. So who are we talking about?
David.
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 O ye mountains,
Yeah.
sing ye back
son of
praise
Daud.
of Allah with him,
Yeah.
and ye
The
birds,
Hebrew David.
and we made the iron
Judah.
soft for him. Commanding who?
People crazy people.
Who's being commanded? David is
David,
being
yeah.
commanded.
David.
Make thou coats of mail, balancing
See
well,
how strong his voice is.
rings of chain armor.
He's got very strong voice.
That's chainmail armor.
Drinks
Chainmail armor
Honey
did
and
not
lemon.
exist at the time of David.
David.
Muhammad
And Solomon.
got his history
Solomon.
wrong.
Muhammad, there was a pagan.
Why did
Pagan
Muhammad
Arabian.
get his history wrong?
Yes.
He got his history wrong
And Mark, he was Romano.
because he lived in the 7th century.
Grego Roman.
In the 7th century,
Marcos.
chainmail was everywhere. Everyone was using chainmail. Everybody knew about chainmail. 1 second. Muhammad didn't know his history.
Now what? Jesus in
Muhammad didn't know his history. Sir, do you want to talk about this passage?
talk about you as a Christian, because you claim to be a Christian. Let's analyze Christianity. Let's
So,
see what Christianity says to them.
his
Because
response
you said, no. I'm
is
coming
not
back.
to talk
You
about
said
the argument.
You get salvation through believing in
Is
Jesus
there
Christ.
anyone
1 second.
that wants to talk
I don't
about the
want anything
argument?
to- You claim salvation is through
Sir,
Jesus Christ,
go on.
crucifixion.
Come closer, I can't hear you, sir. So the chapter and verse is this.
Why you
Surah
avoiding- why you
34,
not talking about Islam, but he's a
Ayah
Christian, you
10,
can't talk about Christianity.
and Ayah
It
11.
don't make sense. It don't make sense, bro.
Go and tell the Dawah team the same thing when they talk about Christianity.
Go and talk to
It's amazing how they live by double standards.
Jesus of the Ulumbu,
That's our prophet.
Have you got it, sir?
Ulumbu.
I take it you're reading it in Arabic, yeah?
Jesus over there, reading the commentary as well.
The commentary. Okay. So, let me ask you this question, sir.
Jesus.
If I said, for instance, if I said that Islam started in Pakistan, right? If I said that, how would you go about proving that I was wrong? That's not a proof, sir. That's just a statement. How would you, if I said, for the sake of argument, if I said, and I know it's wrong, but if I said Islam started in Pakistan, not Arabia, how would you go about proving that I'm an ignoramus that got it wrong? What would you do? Facts and evidence. What kind of facts and evidence? Historical facts and evidence, right?
And geographical.
And geographical, yes, exactly. So you would look at sources, you would see how they correspond to geography, and you would look at artifacts, and you would triangulate those three things to conclude that if Bob said that Islam started in Pakistan, that Bob was an ignoramus because he said something that all the evidence contradicts. So, I already did, you just weren't listening. So, if Muhammad says that chainmail was around at the time of King David, and all the evidence contradicts the Quran, why is it that you suddenly abandon the principle that you established to refute me if I say Islam starts in Pakistan, but when that same principle contradicts Muhammad, you won't go along with the evidence?
Like what?
Evidence, sir.
Like what?
I'm going to give you the evidence. All documents of antiquity show that our earliest possible date for the invention of chainmail is in the Persian period.
What mail?
The Persian period, the Persian Empire.
Chainmail.
Chainmail. It's a kind of armor, sir. It's linking small rings of steel together. And we see it in ancient statues. They depict it in art, they chisel it into statues. We have references to it in historical documents, like Herodotus in his histories. He talks about it. The Persians in their history talk about it. But at the time of King David, which is 1,000 years BC, history has no evidence of chainmail existing at that time. Zero, nada, nothing, not a drop of evidence. All the evidence shows it came later. Thus, when the Quran says that chainmail existed at the time of David, it is like me saying that Islam originated from Pakistan. There is no evidence for either statement. The Quran is wrong. Fact. It is in error. Fact. Now, if the evidence...
Your comparison is wrong.
One second, sir. I will let you respond. I will let you respond. If the Quran is in error, then according to the Quran, which says if this were from any other than Allah, I would find many errors therein, because it's a challenge given to non-believers, not believers. I should not be able to find this error, and I do.
Can I just ask you a question?
Let this uncle go first, because he's...
It's not actually in response to specifically what you say, it's more about whether you believe the Quran is right or wrong. Do you accept it's a book of faith?
I accept it as a book of faith.
So would you respect that as a book of faith, and people who follow that faith and stood around you probably don't appreciate you waving it around and banging it against your chest?
But this is a translation, so it's not actually the Arabic Quran.
Okay, so what you've said is taken from that. So that's if that's not actually the Quran, and what you're saying is taken from that, how are we supposed to believe what you're saying?
Because it's a translation by a Muslim linguist.
Okay, so it is the Quran. It's the word of, we believe that it's a word of God.
Well, you need to argue that with the Dawah team, because they're quite persistent in saying that it only exists in Arabic.
It's about respect. That's all I'm saying. I mean, what you're saying, freedom of speech, all that, I'll give you that. I'm not saying whether you're right, whether you're wrong or anything. All I'm saying is respect is not about factual and non-factual. It's just about there's a lot of Muslims around here, and even as a non-Muslim, you know, if someone was stood here as a book of faith, I'm a Muslim. I wouldn't dare wave the Bible, whether it's translated in a completely different
Actually,
language
go
or not.
speak to Lamin then. Go speak to some of your Muslim brothers who do exactly the same, and they put the Bible on the floor. Go and speak to them about respect.
Regardless so what you're saying is because they do it.
With respect, sir, I've heard your point. Uncle, what did you want to say? Yeah.
Armor is a small thing. It could exist, could not exist, and information about it could be right or wrong. The information you getting from various books would be not reliable.
No, that's
so
why
I
respect
think
is subjective, isn't
this
it?
is completely out of place.
Well, I think that the comparison is a fair one, because what it illustrates is that... Uncle, allow me to... Hold on.
The grave of Prophet Muhammad, say, for example, it existed in India, and you say, no, it's in, he was in Africa or far away. This kind of thing could give some evidence, but like armor and clothing and shoes, this is
allow me to reply, Uncle.
Serious stuff.
Let me just reply to this, Uncle, and then I'll talk to you. So, the problem, the issue is this, Uncle. If you say something that is factually false about a historical event, and all the evidence of history contradicts you, it is fair to say that statement is false. Well, allow me to reply, Uncle. If the Quran makes a statement about history that is factually false, it is fair to say the Quran got it wrong. But if Muslims are saying that the Quran can get nothing wrong, because if it got anything wrong, it wasn't from Allah, then by Muslims' own standards, every Muslim has a good reason now not to believe in the Quran. And that is a fair argument. It's fair because it employs a principle that works in all directions. It's fair because it does not misrepresent or mischaracterize the Muslim position. And it is fair because it's dealing with a very clear verse. I'll read it again. This is Allah speaking to David. Make thou coats of mail, balancing well, rings of chain armour. That is a clear description of chainmail. Chainmail did not exist at the time of David. Muhammad got it wrong. Why? Because in the 7th century, chainmail was commonly used everywhere. He saw it used everywhere, and he just assumed that people had been using it back at the time of David, and he got it wrong, because they weren't. The Persians invented chainmail. Arguably, the Celts invented chainmail. But either way, they all came after David. The Quran is just in error.
Come take over everything from your
God, man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
If you're a Christian, why do you not come here and preach your religion to everyone and let them know about your religion?
Let me answer that question first. Then. So, firstly, I do often, and I've just had it on camera over an hour's worth of conversation about Christianity. So that's the first thing. You're corrected. Secondly,